and I approve this message. Music historian and composer Benjamin Barson joins us now to discuss his new book. It's called Brass Roots Democracy. Love that title, Brass Roots Democracy, Maroon Ecologies in the Jazz Commons, and what political lessons we can learn from jazz history and music in a moment like this. Ben, I love the title, Brass Roots Democracy, and I love this track you've chosen. I give certain guests the opportunity to choose the tracks they want us to play. That might better curate a conversation. So you chose this from Charles Mingus. Tell me about it and tell me why.
Well, first of all, Mr. Smiley, it's an honor to be on the show. I appreciate what you've been doing for years. And this freedom tradition that you're the incarnation of now in this generation has been built up over centuries. And the music has always been an expression of that. And Charles Mingus, immaculate, incredible composer, born in Nogales, Arizona, of mixed Latino and African-American parentage. He's a brass roots composer. You hear in this song the polyphony of multiple horns coming in and out of improvisation, of the blues, of tight coordinated tacks and lines. And I feel like all of that energy has been reflected in the battle for a true interracial democracy that the founders of this country never intended. And so what I've been trying to do with this book is help us hear these freedom echoes of the music from its inception through the Middle Passage, through New Orleans, through Harlem. And I found some really interesting stories along the way, stories that I think will be instructive to not only your listeners, but folks who want a better world around the world. So thanks a lot for inviting me on the show, and I'm happy to dive into some of that history with you.
We will. First, give me some more Mingus, Miles. Ben Barson, here's a big question, but you can handle it. What do you make of the fact, and I'm not naive in asking this, but what do you make of the fact that at the epicenter of this freedom tradition, these freedom echoes, happens to be this particular music born of black people? What do you make of that fact that it is this music at the center of that freedom tradition? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my one of my mentors, Fred Ho, who baritone saxophonist who studied with Archie Shepp and a lot of other luminaries from the Black Arts movement, he always said that jazz or African-American music is the revolutionary music of the 20th century, not just for America, but the whole planet. And he said that it's because it's the music that embodies and expresses the contradiction of the century, rooted in the world's division between oppressor and oppressed, between capitalism and slavery and visions of emancipation. And that's all these struggles for a new world are really happening in the African-American community. They're the ones pointing beyond the mode of production that is honestly killing the planet today. I mean, if you look at the history of slavery, one of the big things they struggled with was environmental depletion. They drained the soil of its health everywhere they went, whereas maroons and black folk, when they were free, either by escaping slavery or through emancipation, they built the opposite, regenerative ecosystems, polycropping, and farming. And when they were prevented from having access to land, they continued that freedom tradition in the music. And that's some of the things that I try to also show in this book.
I could have commenced our conversation here. Let me circle back right quick. I mentioned how much I loved it. This title, Brass Roots Democracy. Tell me about it.
Well, a lot of people, when they think about Reconstruction, they only think about it in terms of the failure of Reconstruction, right? That it was a dream denied. And when I'm referring to Reconstruction, of course, I'm referring to the period immediately after the Civil War, when, after much pressure from abolitionists in both the South and the North, Congress overrode President Johnson and declared the South could not self-govern yet. They kept Union soldiers down there. They ensured that black male suffrage was enforced, and black folk had meaningful political power across the South, some folks who had been formerly enslaved. And what a lot of folks don't really emphasize is not only how progressive and how effective these governments were. They built some of the first modern public school systems, desegregated school systems, but just school systems in general, because the planter class did not want to educate anyone, including poor whites. They built some of the first modern hospital systems, train systems. These were activist governments that were improving the life of everyone, both white and black communities. And of course, you had something similar to today. You had white paramilitaries going around trying to intimidate black communities, trying to prevent them from registering for voter rolls. We had lynchings, we had massacres, and in this whole time period, black communities kept parading, they kept marching, they kept organizing, and they always did it with brass bands by their side. And so when we think about New Orleans jazz and we think about jazz in general, we can't really understand it without thinking about the history of what it meant to play a brass instrument. And here I'm including woodwinds too, like the saxophone and clarinet. So that's really where we're thinking about brass roots democracy. And you have to just envision this for a second. These plantations, which had been the site of basically genocidal concentration camps for centuries, suddenly are big public spaces where folks, freed people from across the region, were converging to discuss, how are they going to vote? How are they going to make decisions? And there was brass bands announcing these meetings to the general public. They didn't have, radios. They didn't have a telephone. So what they did have was this form of communication. So that's where we're getting at with brass roots democracy.
This is getting good. It's getting good early on. The book is called Brass Roots Democracy. It's a new book by jazz historian, professor, and musician Benjamin Barson, revealing the powerful role that music and historical memory played in shaping political action and safeguarding voter rights, as you just heard him say, during Reconstruction. When we come forward, I want to bring this conversation forward to talk about how we do that, how we tap into that music, that same historical memory, not just to safeguard voting rights during Reconstruction back then, what that means for us today as we face an existential threat to our democracy in real time. You're listening to Ben Barson, and I'm glad about it on Tavis, Smiley.
From California to the Carolinas, everybody's listening to Tavis. More when we come forward. Tavis Smiley's new book, The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later, is now on sale everywhere. This classic text shot to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list almost 2 decades ago. If you have the original book, you will surely want to get this 20th anniversary edition with powerful new contributions from today's leading voices. This 20th anniversary edition presents a compelling blend of historical insights and contemporary urgency in this critical and unprecedented election year. Get your copy of The Covenant with Black America 20 years later today.
Make a move into a home of your own. With City National Bank's Ladder Up Home Loan Grant, you could receive up to $20,000 that you never need to pay back. Use it toward your down payment, save on closing costs, or to buy down your mortgage rate. Find out more at cnb.com/ladderuphome. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Property must be in a qualifying market in California, New York, or New Jersey. Additional terms and conditions apply. Not all applicants will qualify. Terms are subject to change without notice. City National Bank is an equal housing lender. Member FDIC. NMLS number 536994.
I need your dollar, that's what I need.
KBLA Talk 1580 celebrates small businesses, the enduring lifeblood of our community, with the launch of the KBLA SMB Marketplace. For the first time, small to medium-sized businesses will have an opportunity to promote their goods and services on KBLA and take advantage of our powerful reach and local marketing power. The SMB Marketplace is hosted exclusively on KBLA1580.com and is accessible from all our social media channels. Whether you're a small mom and pop restaurant, a car dealership, or a professional practitioner, we invite you to join in this new KBLA Talk 1580 initiative to promote your business. As a Black-owned small business, you don't want to miss this unique opportunity to gain new customers on KBLA Talk 1580. For more information, contact us today at smb@kbla1580.com. That's smb@kbla1580.com. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
And if If I share with you my story, would you share your dollar with me? Time to get paid.
This is the story of the one. As a facility technician installing a new welding station, he knows getting the ventilation right is critical for safety. That's why when questions arise, there's Grainger. Grainger offers detailed technical product information online at his fingertips, so it's easy to find what he needs. Because when it comes to safety, having answers means he and his people can breathe a little easier. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Oh no, stomach issues again?
Stomach issues?
Who are you?
Your pancreas. I could be the real reason for your diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose oily stools.
I thought it was my stomach.
People often do, but any of these symptoms could mean having a condition called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. With EPI, the pancreas doesn't release enough enzymes to break down food, but EPI is manageable. Use the symptom checker on identifyepi.com and speak with your doctor. That's identifyepi.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
The book is called Brass Roots Democracy. Brass Roots Democracy. I thought I'd give you a soundtrack to go with it. The author of the text is Ben Barston. I'm pleased to have him as our guest. He's a music historian and composer. And again, just delighted to have him in dialogue. Tell me about this piece, Ben Barston.
So this piece is composed by Archie Shepp. It's on his famous album Attica Blues. Attica Blues, of course, refers to Governor Rockefeller ordering the massacre of uprising prisoners in Attica in the early 70s. And this song is interesting because it's sung by his 7-year-old daughter. And the lyrics of it, Quiet Dawn, are pointing to this was the moment of peak decolonization, right? African countries, Asian countries. The Cuban Revolution was only only 15 years earlier, and they're kind of looking to a new future that's being born, but they're calling it quiet. It's sort of undercover, and that you can hear in the music. It's sort of pointing to these new social relations that couldn't yet be realized in the streets and in political office. Unfortunately, some days it seems like we're farther away from that dawn than ever. But I just thought this track is so optimistic, how he's sort of anointing his daughter as the voice of a new generation, which has since come of age. And here now we're looking to a new generation today to continue that struggle forward. And you don't always hear a young person like that singing in front of a big band. So I just thought that was a really bold move on Archie Shepp, who, as you know, amazing tenor saxophonist, very still active today, living in Paris. He compared his saxophone to an AK-47. So he was very, very militant and very powerful voice of that jazz freedom drive.
To your point about his voice being one of militancy, I've always been struck, Ben, and not just struck, but obviously wildly impressed by the ability of these particular musicians, these artists, to infuse their music with a truth. So there's a truth, there's a truth telling to it. Yeah. And beyond truth telling, there is a bearing witness component. So they're bearing witness. They're speaking truth to power, and for that matter, to the powerless as well. And yet they do all that without proselytizing. No. And they make it entertaining. That's a lot to do. That's a lot to do with a composition. How is all that possible, if that makes sense to you?
Well, I love this quote from Gil Scott-Heron, who is, I think, one of the master composers and lyricists of this tradition, and he sang in bicentennial blues. The blues has grown, but the country has not. The blues remembers everything the country forgot. And it's kind of like there's a third person in the room when this music is being played. It's the audience, it's the musician, but then there's sort of a spirit, an ancestor present, and that's in the scales, that's in the music, that's in the sensibility, that's in something that honestly we can't even really articulate what that is. And I think that the fact that it's a better historical record of the victories and defeats and true spiritual consciousness of this country than you're going to find in an AP history textbook, for instance, and certainly in a speech by anyone in the political class. I think there's a collective genius there that's being tapped into, and it's thousands, millions of blues musicians playing in the Chitlin circuit, right, in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, of these musicians that we were talking about bravely marching in the streets of New Orleans. It's a baton passing that's happening over time, every day, every second. So that's the way I think about it.
If I can borrow from that powerful quote you just shared from Gil Scott Heron, let me ask the question this way. I guess the question is, what can a blues nation learn from a blues people? And that's a question that I could frame in two ways, and so I will. What has this blues nation, this nation with the blues, learned historically from these blues people? And then we can ask it in a contemporary sense. What can, in real time, this nation with the blues learn from a blues people, Ben Barson?
I think that only the people at the bottom of a system who's seen the wretchedness of how humans can behave can also, I think those are the only people that can create the new world, because power corrupts, and it doesn't just corrupt in the sense that people want more richness. It corrupts the corners of our consciousness or of our psyche. It corrupts, your interactions with people at work. It's just a constant threat to your humanity. And when you multiply that on a world historic scale, like we've seen happen in the past 500 years with the rise of global white supremacy and colonialism, I don't think white people are capable of getting themselves out of this crisis. And when I say this crisis, I mean the fact that according to any kind of statistical modeling of human civilization as it stands, things are not looking great for us. I mean, a lot of really smart people have sort of put an expiration date of 2050, somewhere around there, just based on current trends, famines, climate change, political instability, pagers being blown up by remote control. And we multiply those things and we think about how power corrupts. There's no spiritual tradition that white people can draw upon on a mass scale. James Baldwin said, white people are trapped in a history they do not understand, and until they understand it, they cannot be freed from it. They're also imprisoned by the master-slave dialectic. So the blues is the antidote to that. My mentor and teacher and now friend, Salim Washington, great tenor player and an oboist and bass clarinetist, flautist. He also he's the chair of the UCLA Global Jazz Studies program. He calls this music the antidote to the existential crisis that is America. And so when we hear Gil Scott Heron channeling that, when we hear Sidney Bechet, and when we hear Charles Mingus, when we hear Bessie Smith, we're hearing the answer to how to build a spiritual tradition that's not based on human oppression and commodification, to be frank. So that's how I think we do a deep listening of this music and the types of communities that it's pointing to, we might be able to get out of this crisis. But it's not going to happen just with legislation. It's not just going to happen with the Green New Deal. We need a spiritual and cultural revolution, and that music has always pointed that way, and it's always promised that.
Let me ask you whether or not you believe there is in real time an ongoing relationship, a continuing relationship between this music and the freedom tradition, those freedom echoes that you referenced earlier, or whether or not the only way forward is to tap into historical memory.
So I think the answer is both, because, for instance, you've got folks like Christian Scott Atunde Adjua, kind of bold new school sort of trumpeter from New Orleans, and he's been composing work like the Ku Klux Police Department for years, even before the George Floyd uprisings, right? You've got folks like Terrence Blanchard writing and, editorials for NPR, recording new operas and albums that speak to police brutality. And so you see the music is more responsive to historical events than really anything else we can think of. I mean, just to be honest, I'm also thinking about this music as a distinct tradition. So I'm sorry, I have a lot of friends who are classical musicians. My wife is an opera singer, amongst other things. And, I don't see the classical canon responding to these uprisings in the way that quite frankly, black music is doing. Mm-hmm. And that might seem so obvious we don't need to even just mention it, but I think it does need to be mentioned, because we have to think about what are the forces of anti-fascism that we take for granted, and hip-hop, I think, is a continuation of this blues tradition in its own way. And we still have, visionary progressive jazz artists setting the stage for that today as well. In fact, someone that I'm bringing to Bucknell, which is where I'm a professor, Albert Marquez, this is a Spanish-born composer. He's collaborating with a death row inmate in Ohio named Keith Lamar, a fantastic poet and writer, and they've publicized Keith's case. He was wrongfully convicted for a riot that he did not start, but he was too political and too politicized for the guards to sort of let him get away with just being a relatively free consciousness, and so they've condemned him to death. And his execution date has been pushed back by 4 years to 2027 because of this campaign, in part because of this campaign. So I see this happening in millions of ways, both big and small, at the grassroots and in industry. But it is true, unfortunately, that there are forces of reaction in the music world as well. So I don't want to pretend like it's all rosy, that there's no conflict, but I'm confident that we'll still see a way forward from the musicians themselves.
Speaking of historical memory, I'm curious as to whether or not you think it is by chance or by choice, put another way, that it is intentional or unintentional, that we tend to ignore, as you tapped into earlier, how might I put it, the revolutionary genealogy of jazz. Revolutionary is a key phrase here. I'm thinking about Nelson Mandela and how at his funeral and near the end of his life, the only Mandela we wanted to celebrate was the one wearing the Versace shirt as president, bringing the country together. Nobody wanted to deal with Mandela's revolutionary roots, and I feel the same way sometimes about the jazz, about the music of jazz, that we ignore the revolutionary roots of this music, which is what this Brass Roots Democracy book is really all about.
Every system of power has to co-opt its opposition over time if it can't defeat it. And so, like you mentioned, Nelson Mandela, it's a beautiful, it's a great metaphor and great example of exactly how power and political regimes are so effective in doing that. Of course, Martin Luther King Jr. Became a socialist at the end of his life, was anti-imperialist, and, was moving in a direction that seemed to be quite similar to Malcolm's, or at least was parallel to it. But that's not what we learn, in public high school when we're 13 and 14 anymore, right? So the music's revolutionary roots are deliberately obfuscated and made opaque, and that happens in ways that are both conscious and unconscious. That happens at places like universities. It happens at places like performing arts organizations. And they'll, once, for instance, the George Floyd uprisings took place, they start to change their tune a little bit, but they can't really, they're structurally prohibited in a way from talking about, for instance, musicians being part of revolutionary labor unions or being part of the Black Arts Movement, protesting at the UN the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, the president of the Congo, who was assassinated in the early 1960s, which Max Roach and Abbey Lincoln both did. So, yeah, these revolutionary roots need to be part of the curriculum, in my opinion, and that's one thing that I hope Grassroots Democracy contributes to. And I should mention it's being published by Wesleyan University Press, and I hope you can check it out and see ways that the history can be activated today.
Finally here, I think, I got about 2 minutes left here. You are being heard around the country right now. Thankfully, this program is nationally syndicated, but one of the markets you're being heard in right now is New Orleans. So for all the folk listening to us right now in New Orleans, tell me how you hope this book will change the way that we have thought or think about New Orleans music.
So one of the big interventions this book makes is to say that the Haitian Revolution was central to the development of New Orleans black culture, both right after the revolution, because New Orleans population is doubled by reactionary, counter-revolutionary planters who escaped from Saint-Domingue, who escaped from Toussaint's armies and resettled in New Orleans, and often brought enslaved people with them who were very politicized, and they deepened the Latin American and Haitian and African influences in New Orleans. And then a generation later, 2 generations later, during Reconstruction, a lot of these activists who are using brass bands and playing in brass bands had Haitian roots. A lot of the musicians in early jazz also had Haitian roots. I'm thinking about Daniel Day-Dune and Mamie Day-Dune, who wrote the first 12-bar blues. I'm thinking about Jelly Roll Morton. And I think that thinking about the revolutionary implications of Haiti can also help us think about what's at stake in dehumanizing Haitians, that revolutionary legacy is also obfuscated and obscured. And the last thing I just want to mention is that there will be an event, a book launch in New Orleans in January 19th. Location is still being set. We're also working with Haitian Action Committee in the Bay Area. I know that you've had Pierre Labossiere on the show. We're working with Pierre to do an event at La Peña Cultural Center in Berkeley on October 6th. That's going to be at 6 p.m. And just doing a lot of grassroots DIY events to get the word of this book out, but also to connect it to living movements. So thanks for giving me a chance to talk about that.
It's been my great honor to have had you on this program, Ben Barson, and your comments about Haiti are particularly resonant right about now, given the strange things that came out of Donald Trump's mouth at that debate about anyway, don't get me started. His comments about the Haitian people just are upsetting in a variety of ways. Our friend and brother Robin D.G. Kelly, speaking of great jazz artists, who wrote the seminal book, I think, these days on Thelonious Monk, says this about brass roots democracy. From now on, brass roots democracy should be our starting point. Those are strong words of encouragement and endorsement from Robin D.G. Kelly, that from now on, this book, Brass Roots Democracy, should be our starting point. That's high cotton, Ben Barson. Congrats on the text. Good to have you on the program, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tavis Smiley. It's an honor. Keep doing what you're doing, and I'd be happy to come talk to you again sometime in the future.
We'll make it happen. Thank you for the invitation, for the offer, I should say. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good. Yeah, man. Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward. Paid for by government.com. Did you know the United States Mint has issued a new Morgan silver dollar coin in proof condition for the first time? Not only that, they are also minted in 99.9% pure silver for the first time ever in history. Coin experts are calling this an amazing opportunity for anyone that knows the enduring popularity of Morgans. But you must hurry. Only 400,000 of these legal tender silver dollars were issued. These first ever Morgan silver dollars are brand new with stunning mirror-like finish, minted by the iconic San Francisco Mint. Call now and you're guaranteed a new first ever 99.9% pure silver proof Morgan dollar. To learn more, call 1-800-973-9717. If you order now, you will receive a free coin collector bonus pack, a $25 value, free with every order. Call 1-800-973-9717 now to secure your new Morgan silver dollars before they are gone. That's 1-800-973-9717.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Janet Jackson says she's heard that Vice President Kamala Harris isn't black. In an interview published by The Guardian Saturday, the African-American pop star was asked how she feels about the possibility of the first black female U.S. president. Jackson responded by saying she's heard Harris is Indian and her father is white, which is false. Whooping cough cases are on the rise in the U.S. Recent numbers from the CDC show there have been over 14,500 confirmed cases of whooping cough so far in 2024. Sales of the new iPhone 16 are expected to set records. According to analysts at Wedbush, demand for the AI-powered smartphone is strong, with initial sales tracking 8 to 10 million units ahead of the iPhone 15's record-breaking debut. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Staples prints anything you need for your business like banners, flyers, and signs. And Staples will beat any price quote. Plus, now print more, save more. Up to $150 off your print purchase. Offer ends 11/2. Exclusions apply. Visit staples.com/print for details or staples.com/price match for price match guarantee.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
One of the heroes in the Rams' 27-24 win over the 49ers Sunday was an unknown and undrafted rookie named Xavier Smith, a graduate from HBCU Florida A&M. Playing in his first NFL regular season game, Smith returned a punt 37 yards to put the Rams at the 50-yard line with 42 seconds left in the fourth quarter. 3 plays later, Joshua Carty kicked a 37-yard field goal with 2 seconds left to give the Rams a comeback win. Rams coach Sean McVay gave Smith a game ball inside a jubilant Rams locker room. Things were not so festive inside the Chargers locker room. They lost at Pittsburgh 20-10 and may have lost quarterback Justin Herbert for a while. Herbert re-injured his left ankle in the third quarter and left the stadium in a boot cast. Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts hit back-to-back homers in the bottom of the ninth to give the Dodgers a walk-off win over Colorado. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio that's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Wendy's breakfast burrito is everything you want for breakfast. Fresh cracked eggs, seasoned potatoes, American cheese, cheese sauce, bacon, or sausage, all rolled up into one warm tortilla. Want the boss of breakfast burritos? Gotta be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's.
October 2nd is California Clean Air Day. It's your chance to ride Metro for free. You'll be helping make the air cleaner and our roads less crowded. Let's clear the air together and make Los Angeles healthier. Check out metro.net for more info.
As a mom, comforting my family is what I do best. Vicks Vapor Stick provides soothing, non-medicated Vicks Vapors in an easy-to-apply stick. And it dries fast, so there's no mess. I use it to comfort myself and my family.
Thanks, Mom.
Vicks Vapo Stick. Soothing comfort for the whole family. And when you need more comfort for yourself, try Vicks Vapo Shower Max for steamy Vicks Vapors.
Use as directed. Vapo Stick for use ages 4 and up. Vapo Shower Max used for adults only.
Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my side softer?
Can I make my side firmer whenever I want? Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. 94% of Sleep Number smart sleepers report better sleep. J.D. Power ranks Sleep Number #1 in customer satisfaction with mattresses purchased in-store. And now, during our biggest sale of the year, save 50% on the Sleep Number Limited Edition smart bed. Limited time. For J.D. Power 2023 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. To find a store near you, visit sleepnumber.com.
Sometimes he fails at fitting in, but we're okay with that. You're inside the Tavis Smiley Show.
You are indeed with Dr. Adrian Hollis as we continue our year-long series on climate justice, climate equity, and climate resilience. A brief conversation now with this environmental justice advocate, namely about her work with the National Wildlife Federation. Dr. Hollis, good to have you on this program. How are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my great honor to have you on the program. Let me just go right at this. There's a lot I want to talk about these 25 or 30 minutes that we have here. But I want to start with this. And I'm putting you on the spot here, but I know you can handle it. Talk to me about the relationship, why the National Wildlife Federation and the work that they do on climate issues ought to matter to black people. What is that connection?
The connection is that things that affect animals and wildlife affect people. All living things are affected by climate. And as a people, we traditionally don't have a role in conservation. We don't attend state parks, national parks, things of, because of our past experiences. So we are going to be most impacted, but we also need any activities that are done around conservation efforts, to also consider how they're going to affect us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they're talking about clean water for animals, then clean water for people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Why have, to your mind and to your point, black folk been relatively absent in the conservation space?
Well, it's so interesting. I was in a meeting and someone told me that they grew up thinking that it wasn't safe for us to be out in nature, camping, hunting, all of those things, because that's the way, just historically speaking, as a people, we have not had the best relationship with, those who are out in nature. Nature wasn't, these positions, these places weren't created for us.
Mm-hmm.
They were for, let's be honest, rich white men.
Mm-hmm. How, to the extent that it has, how's that changed over the years?
Oh, my goodness, it's changed a lot because people have been focusing on that. At the National Wildlife Federation, environmental justice is one of the three pillars, one of the three focal areas. And we just supported an activity by Audrey Peterman, who does a lot of work around state parks, which focuses on diversifying these national parks, the people who visit them. So I think that there's been a concerted effort to include diverse populations, those of us who traditionally don't see it as a space for us to be in, a welcome space for us to be in.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about the relationship between the environment and animals. I'm pivoting here to black people. One thing is for certain, black folk love animals like anybody else. But when we think about our love for our pets, we don't make that connection to the environment. I'm hoping that you'll do that for me.
Yeah, let's talk about it in terms of subsistence fishing, for example.
Mm-hmm.
People who need to fish to eat. When I grew up in Mobile, we used to go crabbing so that we could have gumbo because it was cheap to feed 5 children, from a pot of gumbo, crab. So clean water in that regard. Like, people need to eat. People need to have a place, for example, when it comes to, I have colleagues in South Carolina, because of deforestation and other activities, they're more prone to flooding. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Trees are removed, the homes are flooded. And so when we think about the impact that climate has on the environment, it definitely has a direct connection to people. And we've been put in positions where we're in less desirable areas more prone to flooding, for example. And so we need to have activities focused on conservation, nature-based solutions that will impact us positively.
Mm-hmm. When you say nature-based solutions, unpack that for me.
Well, when I talk about nature-based, I'm talking about natural solutions like planting trees that are endemic to an area that take up water so that it mitigates flooding, for example, so that people then don't have to live in homes that are flooded and they can't afford to have them repaired. So they live in areas that have mold and mildew, maybe black mold. And what if it's in a time of COVID? Now they're more at risk, right? Because we know that COVID is an opportunistic infection. So now we've increased the chances that people of color are going to die, that their health is impacted. So
I'm going to say something to you I know you've heard more than once in your career. It's not a compliment, and yet I don't think it's a pejorative necessarily. I think there may be some truth to it with regard to some people. But there are any number of stories over the years I could point to, again, this is not foreign to you, where one could extract from the story the following, that some folk in this country care more about animals than they care about other human beings. So I know you've heard that before in a variety of contexts. They care more about those animals than they care about us as human beings. I wonder how that relates to the work of the National Wildlife Federation. Here's what I'm driving toward. Even if people don't take issues of climate justice, climate equity, and climate resilience seriously, for those people in this country, those fellow citizens who are, to your earlier point, are being forced to live in certain spaces, living next to environmental toxic waste dumps, those who don't have clean water, those who don't have clean air. We all know that black folk are the disproportionate victims of these climate maladies, and yet we've been left out of these conversations, hence this year-long series focusing on climate justice. You see what I'm driving here. What I'm driving toward is whether or not caring about animals, even if they don't care about the human beings who are being impacted by these climate maladies, can advance us where we need to go. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and and the answer is absolutely yes.
Wow.
Because anything that impacts one group is going to impact the other. When you want to talk about clean water for fish, for fishing, or clean air, so that you can go hunting and animal hunting, humans are going to benefit from that, from clean air and things like that. So whether it's deliberate or not, we're going to be impacted in a positive way or negative way, depending on what you do to the environment, right? Because the environment is everybody, every living thing.
Yeah. I know that this week, I was saying to a guest earlier, we were talking about jazz, and I was making the point that this program is heard across the country in markets everywhere, including New Orleans. So I asked him a specific question for the people listening in New Orleans. I note now that this week is Climate Week in New York City. I've been in New York over the years during Climate Week. And let me just tell you about Climate Week New York City, and I'll ask a question about it when we come forward, because we're heard in New York City right now. But Climate Week New York City is the largest annual climate event of its kind. It brings together over 600 events and activities across the city, in person, hybrid, online. But each year, businesses, business leaders, political change makers, local decision takers, and civil society representatives of all ages and backgrounds from all over the world gather in New York City to drive the transition, to speed up progress, and champion the change that is already happening, though not fast enough. So it's a big week. There is no city that has a week focused on climate like they do in New York City. For Climate Week, that week is underway right now. One of the reasons I wanted to have Adrienne Hollis on this program in this particular week. I want to ask her a question about that, a couple of questions about that, now that I've told you about it when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Generous listening. Charitable listening. It's why everybody wants to talk to Tavis. The conversation continues when we come forward.
So you may have heard of Project 2025, a plan crafted by Trump and his MAGA loyalists to give Trump virtually unchecked political power and take Black America backwards. Here's how. Project 2025 strips away our voting rights protections, and it eliminates the Department of Education. It would siphon public school funding to private schools, leaving our kids behind. Planning on going to college? Good luck paying for it. Project 2025 cuts funding for federal student loans. Trump's Project 2025 would also make states monitor women's pregnancies, and it bans abortion. Project 2025 would also gut Obamacare, ripping away health care from millions. Simply put, Trump's Project 2025 would be devastating to Black America. But we can stop it by voting for Kamala Harris for president, because we are not going back.
I'm Kamala Harris, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Harris for president.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminding you that we keep us safe. Pro Football Hall of Famer and urban peace pioneer Jim Brown believed in just that. So he founded the Amera I Can Foundation for Social Change in 1988, focusing on at-risk and high-risk youth in underserved schools and juvenile detention facilities, as well as adult incarceration and reentry initiatives. The core of the Amera I Can program is its 15-chapter life skills curriculum. Mastery of these skills allows individuals to meet their academic potential, conform their behavior to acceptable societal standards, and improve the quality of their lives by equipping them with what they need to confidently and successfully contribute to society. Today, the foundation is led by its president, Monique Brown, who has been actively involved in the organization for more than 25 years. The Amera I Can Foundation continues its work in memory of its founder, actor, philanthropist, and NFL legend Jim Brown. To get involved or make a donation, please visit AmeriICanCommunity.partners. That's AmeriICanCommunity.partners. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We asked seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well-trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone. And should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month.
If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
Freedom is an endless meeting. So let's get back to it with Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley, Dr. Adrian Hollis of the National Wildlife Federation, continuing our year-long series on climate justice, climate equity, and climate resilience, and why this stuff ought to matter to all of us, certainly the African-American community. And so this week, I mentioned a moment ago, is Climate Change Week in New York City, the largest annual climate event of its kind, bringing together hundreds of folk to talk about, again, driving this transition, speeding up progress, and championing the change that is already happening but needs to be a little faster. And so, Dr. Hollis, I wanted to ask you whether or not, to your mind, these kinds of things make a difference, these kinds of events matter. I recognize that this is not a sexy subject, and so I've dedicated a year to talking about it as often as we can. And yet I wonder, I'm always looking for the way forward, the way to convince people that these issues do matter to them. And I wonder whether or not these events like Climate Week in New York City actually make a difference.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll tell you why. Mm-hmm. Not only is it the largest event and you're bringing in a lot of community voices, and, you know, any activity that's going to be successful is community-led and community-driven, but you're bringing in other stakeholders who need to be part of the conversation, right? Mm-hmm. Businesses, others who need to be concerned about these issues. They're in one place together. They're in different meetings and different panels and different discussion scenarios. This is the opportune moment, and this is the opportune period of time in history for environmental justice to be a focal point.
Mm-hmm. Is environmental justice a focal point, to your mind, in this critical election year? I don't mean to make you political. I'm just asking, of all the things on the docket, whether or not you see it as a focal point, to use your phrase.
I do see it as a focal point because, you know, depending on who's elected, the trajectory of environmental justice may change. Mm-hmm. You know, in this current administration, I have to say that there have been a number of activities that have focused on environmental justice, and I think in order for that to continue, you know, there'll have to be specific outcomes in the election.
Mm-hmm. What most
I'm trying to say this in a way that won't get me fired.
No, I get it. No, I ain't trying to get you fired either. That's why I said I'm not trying to make you political. Let me take the heat, not you. National Wildlife Federation ain't gonna fire me. I can assure you that, because I ain't working for them anyway. So let me protect you. I wanted to ask whether or not you saw it on the docket. So you answered nicely, and you're not in any trouble. But let me take a step further though, and ask you though a question that won't get you fired. And that is, doing the work that you do every day around issues of climate equity, climate justice, climate resilience, what most concerns you about the future that our people are staring down?
I think what most concerns me is the fact that everybody isn't on board. Mm-hmm. That whenever there's another issue, like if it's an issue about the wetlands in Florida, for example, because I'm living in Jacksonville, that the question that should be asked after that is, who are the people? Who's involved? You know, who's impacted? And mm-hmm. that question doesn't always follow. And to me, that's a concern.
Mm. Our remaining moments for Dr. Adrian Hollis of the National Wildlife Federation when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Why does Tavis say, when we come forward? Because he's not going back. And you don't have to go back either. Forward ever, backward never. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
You know where you want to go in life, and City National Bank can help. City National knows the dedication it takes to build your vision for the future into a reality, and our team is here for you. We have a wide range of options to help, from personal savings accounts to interest-bearing money market savings accounts and more, all designed to help you get where you want to go. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Learn more at cnb.com. City National Bank is a subsidiary of Royal Bank of Canada, member FDIC.
My mom has taken up going to the park to practice yoga.
My dad's going to a club, but not a book club, a salsa club.
Finding new hobbies comes with age.
My mom has started getting lost and not knowing where she's going.
Becoming lost or disoriented doesn't. Confusion with time or place may be a sign of Alzheimer's. An early diagnosis can help improve the quality of life for your loved one. Learn the warning signs of Alzheimer's at 10signs.org. Brought to you by the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
If you love to travel, Capital One has a rewards credit card that's perfect for you. With Venture X, earn unlimited double miles on everything you buy and turn everyday purchases into extraordinary trips. Plus, receive premium travel benefits like access to over 1,300 airport lounges where you just check in and chill out. Open up a world of possibilities with Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Lounge access is subject to change. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Sometimes he fails at fitting in, but we're okay with that. You're inside the Tavis Smiley Show.
You are indeed Dr. Adrian Hollis, is our guest of the National Wildlife Federation. I could have started our conversation here, but in the 4 minutes I have left, let me cover a bit more ground with you. I'm always curious about our people in these spaces. First of all, the backstory. How did the environment become your muse? How did that become the lane you're running in?
Because I grew up in Mobile, Alabama, and I was exposed to what I later realized was environmental racism as a child, because we weren't allowed to go to like Pensacola Beach, and the beaches we went to were not really beaches. They were oil field, dirty sand, water bodies. And I just remember going in with a little white swimsuit and coming out with a black swimsuit. And that was my first, introduction. And from that, it was all about what's fair and what's right.
Tell me more about that story. That's fascinating. Going in with a white swimsuit, coming out with a black swimsuit.
Yeah, as a little girl. And, that's what we did. And it was always unfair that we had to go to the places where people were considered to be less than. That was just the first experience. And then there was, there were issues around, for example, targeted advertising around smoking in the youth and how we were depicted as if you smoke, you're cool, and not if you smoke, you get lung cancer, which my mom is a 6-time cancer survivor, And in the neighborhoods where we all lived, all the kids had asthma, including my brother. And we couldn't afford to pay insurance, so we had to, pay for medical coverage. So the moms had to hold the children over hot water, hoping it would open up the airway so that they could breathe. All of these things add up.
Yeah. How we are all the sum total of our life's experiences. How do those experiences impact the work you do today?
Oh my God, they're the reason I do the work I do is because what has happened to the people I know and the people I have met is not fair, and it's blatant. And I'm just, I'm an advocate for what's right, I guess, and I'll fight for what's wrong, and I'll fight alongside my community partners.
Yeah. Tell me how we go about having conversations about climate justice, climate equity, climate resilience that include protection and preservation of wildlife, since that's what you do every day.
Right. Well, I think the first thing we have to realize is that everything, climate justice, all gender justice, all of that is under the umbrella of environmental justice, at least in my opinion. And so things that affect, climate change is a threat multiplier. We've heard that multiple times. Black people, people of color are affected disproportionately, first and worst, but ultimately we're all going to be affected, all living things. And so as long as people realize and recognize the connection, the interconnectedness between people and the planet, then any action that someone engages in or decides to engage in is going to affect everything in a positive way. Any positive action, I should say.
Yeah. With all due respect to your growing up in Mobile, Alabama, which I love, by the way. For those of us who live and work in the city, which means many of us, so many of our people live and work in urban areas. We are urban dwellers. I wonder what that means for our participation or lack thereof in this conversation about protecting and preserving wildlife in cities like New York, for example, or L.A., where I sit right now.
Well, let me say this. I lived in Bowie, Maryland until April. I moved from my mom. And where I lived, there was a beautiful green space. It was all torn down, trees and everything, and deer, fox, everything was in there so that people could build houses. And the community got involved, but got involved too late. And we need to be on committees, on these panels, on the Public Service Commission, all of that, so that we can have a voice. And you know, I remember seeing a deer just running around this fenced-in area looking for a way out. And I was like, gosh, that's the way people are. You know, when we're looking for places to survive, like if it's hot and we don't have green space, what does that mean? That means people are going to be affected by heat and heat stroke and all of that. And so, you know, that's why I said how interconnected things are. You know, wildlife and people, planet, fauna, however you want to say it, it's all the same, right? It's all living things. And making sure that we continue to survive.
No, that's the key. We got to survive here. Yeah, exactly. Dr. Adrienne Hollis is her name. She's an environmental justice advocate, of course, working with the National Wildlife Federation. This conversation is a part of our continuing series focusing on issues of the climate in our community throughout this year, a 12-month campaign of conversation with all kinds of experts who look just like you and me. Dr. Hollis, thank you for your work and your witness. Good to have you on this program. All the best to you.
Thank you so much.
My honor. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Janet Jackson says she's heard that Vice President Kamala Harris isn't black. In an interview published by The Guardian Saturday, the African-American pop star was asked how she feels about the possibility of the first black female U.S. president. Jackson responded by saying she's heard Harris is Indian and her father is white, which is false. Whooping cough cases are on the rise in the U.S. Recent numbers from the CDC show there have been over 14,500 confirmed cases of whooping cough so far in 2024. Sales of the new iPhone 16 are expected to set records. According to analysts at Wedbush, demand for the AI-powered smartphone is strong, with initial sales tracking 8 to 10 million units ahead of the iPhone 15's record-breaking debut. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, The Black